I totally believe in separating the world of your business and your personal. There's some overlap, and that always happens at some point. But having it separate makes it so much easier because you don't want to get into a position to where you're now pulling funds from your business to help support your personal life.
Welcome to Living Not So Fabulously.
Husband,
Yes, dear.
would you say that being an entrepreneur is easy?
Oh, no. And I probably would put an HE double hockey sticks in front of that no if this wasn't Yahoo Finance.
I tend to agree. Then why do so many entrepreneurs become serial entrepreneurs?
I don't know, maybe we're masochistic? Why?
Because today's guest is a serial entrepreneur and he joins us to share one of his biggest lessons in being a small business owner.
That's right. Phelan Spurlock is an award-winning marketing professional with a flair for experiential, multicultural, and digital campaigns with clients from Procter & Gamble to Rolls-Royce. He's the founder of Prototype Marketing, as well as a clothing line called Brooklyn League, which he joins us today to talk about. But that's not all, but we'll save that for later.
Phew, let's get on with the show.
Right. Well, welcome, Phelan. We are really excited to talk to you about the ups and downs that you've had in your career as an entrepreneur. But before we get started, maybe you could share with us 3 things that you think entrepreneurs should be thinking about today.
Yeah, no. Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. 3 things that an entrepreneur should think about before starting a business. I would definitely say definitely should know your audience, and I think a subcategory under that is knowing your audience and knowing how to best serve your audience with your product or your service, right? I think when you're thinking about an audience, even when you're thinking about doing our marketing plan or our strategy, that comes into place in case you want to actually target them, which you should as a small business owner. But I also think that when people think about, oh, my audience is like, oh, okay, they may just live in California and they are 25. I'm like, that's a good start for like demographics, but you have to do demographics and psychographics. So your psychographics are pretty much like your hobbies and things that interest you. Whereas your demographics are your things like your age and your location. And so I tell most of my clients all the time to have at least 25 data points on your audience because you can really plug a lot of those key points and that data points actually into your Facebook ad manager or your Google ad manager, TikTok ad manager. So that's my first. My second would be just do it, just launch it. And so I say that, but I'm like, launch it, just do it because, we can always procrastinate to make things perfect, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm here to say it will not probably be perfect the first go around. But if you have some type of strategy in place or an idea or a go-to-market plan, either you develop it or a hired expert develop it, I think that is good enough to just launch it and go and let your audience kind of help guide you on how you can make those small tweaks. But if you sit and try to make it perfect, it will never launch. Mm-hmm. So you never launch it. So definitely just launch it. And the third thing is it will always cost more than you think.
So I hear lots of experience here.
True words have never been said.
Yes. So that's I would say that it always costs more than what you think. Definitely have a budget in place and think about that. But I would definitely think about having a reserve just in case because there will always be something small that happens like, oh, I forgot to like order X, Y, and Z, or I have to pay for this influencer that, I think that, it wasn't part of our original plan, but I think it would actually help, boost. So definitely have the reserves and definitely have a budget, but just know that it probably will always cost. And that's kind of like a little bit into my story. So
yeah, no doubt. And we'll dive into that. So you're saying that in addition to your emergency savings, just as a human being, mm-hmm. you should have an additional reserve if you're going to dive into entrepreneurship.
Absolutely. Because you want to, I totally believe in separating the world of your business and your personal. There's some overlap, and that always happens at some point. But having it separate makes it so much easier because you don't want to get into a position to where you're now pulling funds from your business to help support your personal life, which again is very much about my story that I have to talk about. And I learned a really big lesson in that. And so I like to keep it separate. So having that reserve, same as you would have if an emergency fund for your personal, it's the same thing as having an emergency fund for your business.
Yeah. It almost seems like entrepreneurship is very tricky, right? But why? Well, I mean, we're doing what we love, what we're passionate about. What's not
no
to
corporate
love
oversight
about being an entrepreneur, right?
What's not to love? Yeah, there's a lot of things that's not to love. I think it's depending on who you are, and which is why I always say, like, it can seem so glamorous at times online, or how many people
Right.
make it seem like it's, oh my God, you can just work from ever, you can do whatever you want. And that's not necessarily the case, especially when you're starting off a business, if you want to do it the right way, in my mind. And so as much as it is rewarding and you can really get a lot from that, it is also, you have to put the effort and energy into it. You have to put the time into it. You have to think about your finances. But I think it's not for everyone. And I think someone has to really dig deep into understanding and also talking to people who have businesses and getting mentors and finding out like what was their experience before they kind of make that jump into it.
Yeah, you're kind of talking about this this intertwining of personal and business.
Mhm.
I think emotionally and financially. Do you think that in the modern world we live in today that you can actually turn your side gig into a full-time, or do you think you need to have a stable job to start your business?
And I think that also depends on how how willing are you to dig deep and dive deep into that, right? I always started most of my business as being an entrepreneur, and currently I'm an
I'm sorry, what
entrepreneur.
was that?
Entrepreneur,
Entrepreneur.
yes.
Please define that.
So basically, who has a 9 to 5 or has a contract job or has a job, but also has businesses, and these businesses are thriving, and there are people who are help managing and running those businesses, as well as I'm also working for someone else. And so there's been moments in my life when I've been an entrepreneur or I've just been completely without having a 9 to 5 as well. I found that if you don't want to go through sometimes that point of just like, oh my gosh, my money, I'm pulling money maybe from my savings or emergency funds and like that. It's great to have that support, if you're, obviously if your job allows that, have the support of having a 9 to 5 job, getting that steady income where you have to worry about, I need to push this out as soon as possible, where sometimes you may push it out prematurely or just I don't have like the full bandwidth to do it, or even like the capital to actually do it. But I also believe that if you have that thought and you've been saving and you may have had a job and you're ready to leave that job and to do that, I think that's perfectly fine as well. But I just think that you have to be aware of those things that may pop up financially sometime, which is why I say have those reserves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do appreciate you mentioning this idea that it really kind of depends,
Mhm.
right? Because there are so many. I mean, if I'm going to try to start a coffee shop, I probably can't also have a 9 to 5.
Absolutely, absolutely. But again, launch it, but take the time to grow it and not try to rush that process. So, yeah.
Right.
So let's dive into your story as an entrepreneur a little bit, the highs and the lows as well. What was one of the biggest mistakes that you said you think that you made maybe when you launched Brooklyn League?
Yeah. So Brooklyn League was a side gig. I was definitely full into corporate America, 9 to 5 job, steady income, and I launched Brooklyn League as a hobby, as a creative outlet. And just to give more context, people may not know, Brooklyn League is a e-commerce brand. It's a streetwear brand that encompasses Brooklyn, and it's a merging of old school Brooklyn, new school Brooklyn through art, through clothing, and other accessories. And so I started that because I live in Brooklyn. I love Brooklyn. So I wanted to like kind of show what does Brooklyn like to me as someone who moved to Brooklyn, but also have a lot of friends who were born and raised in Brooklyn. And so that's the reason why I was kind of like melding the two worlds together. And so I started with just like, I'm going to put it out there. People may purchase it. It's not going to, if I make money, great. If I don't make money, fine as well. And then it got to a point where I was like, oh, this is actually picking up some steam. Like people are actually really into this. And so I started to do pop-up shops, but I'm still just like, I'm not making enough money to live off this. This is just still purely a hobby for me. Then fast forward to 2020, I was like, okay, it's time for me to leave corporate. I can do it. And I left in February of 2020 and did not know.
You had no insight to what
No
was coming?
insight, no data points on that.
Right, exactly. Mother Nature
Yeah.
was not telling you
Yeah.
she's coming for you.
Yeah. And so pandemic hit, right? And I was just like, oh, I have a lot of time on my hands right now. And so as being a marketer by profession, I was like, well, let me at least use this time to kind of like enhance my skill set. And so I started taking more digital marketing and advertising courses. And I was like, well, let me just apply this to Brooklyn League. I have nothing but time at this point right now. Let's try it. So I was able to scale this brand that I was making, on a good month, maybe like or $5,000 or something like that. It really wasn't like a lot.
Yeah, but not bad.
But not bad. But like majority of the time it was like 600. So I was able to scale that brand to like over $10,000 within a month after start incorporating some of the things that I learned in that course. And so I was like, oh, this is like just extra income coming in. So I was just like, all right, so now I'm getting 10,000. Now I'm getting 20,000 a month. Now I'm getting 30,000 a month.
Nice.
And instead, and one of the biggest things that I didn't realize is when I made that shift to kind of turn it from a side gig to an actual, like, this is my career, this is my like job. I work for my company now, is I didn't take into account the finance aspect of it. I was definitely using some of the money from that I was making from Brooklyn into my personal life and funding some of my personal life and things I wanted to do and trips and like, it was the pandemic, so like things were cheap, but still I was just like, well, I can still kind of travel a little bit and do things like that, if, those countries are open and obviously if flights were allowing me to do so. And so that point was great. It was a really good ride until it was not, until I did not have money saved. And so what I was doing was taking a little money and kind of reinvesting it into my advertising so it can keep the machine running. But then there was a point when Apple made a decision to change their rules on how people are being tracked.
Mm-hmm.
And that literally changed the game of
iOS
advertising.
17.
Yes.
It's the bane of our existence as well.
That changed everything. It dried up. And I had nothing really to show as far as savings from that company. And I was making so much money from that company. And, luckily I did have like my money, my personal money saved, but it was just like, this is a complete disservice to my company because that was really growing and thriving. And now that has dried up and I have to like reconfigure and think about how I'm going to get more customers in because that change in iOS completely changed the whole algorithm for advertising. And so I had to go back to the drawing board. And I had to go back to doing, when everything was open back up, pop-up shops and things that I haven't done in quite some time because I kind of built enough of a base. And yet I still have my core customers who, if I send an email, I would get sales in. But it just wasn't the same when I was having these ads kind of really help out. And so that was a big learning lesson. It's just that's why I'm also like, have reserve, save, make sure you're saving for it because that really kind of opened my eye up of just like, oh, this is no longer a side gig. I don't have a 9-to-5 anymore.
Right.
This is it. This and like my agency, my marketing agency, those are my sources of income. So it changed of mindset.
Yeah. So in today's world, many of us who are entrepreneurs are very, very heavily lean into social media. So we've dealt with challenges with Apple as well, Facebook. Now those who have a huge presence on TikTok are going to have a struggle come up the next couple of weeks. In hindsight, what would you have saved? How much more would you have saved to launch Brooklyn League than you maybe did?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I was doing was I was putting around, I think I was like 20%, about 10-20% back into advertising. I would have continued to do that, probably amped up a little bit more, but I've also would have put more to the side. I really wasn't saving. I mean, I was kind of just like, putting it back into that and maybe $1,000 or $2,000 a month, and then everything else was just going to like fueling lifestyle or just like traveling and again, traveling and shopping and doing everything else like that. Again, I'm at home, I'm shopping on other e-commerce sites. So I would probably put more money towards that percentage. I'm not sure right now what that would be, but definitely much more than that. So I would probably say at least like 40% or so towards it.
Yeah. Just 1 second, fan. We'll be right back after this break.
Well, welcome back to Living Not So Fabulously. Today we're speaking with Fayon Spurlock about the challenges of being an entrepreneur. So Fayon, one of our friends actually has a saying up on she's an entrepreneur and she has a saying up on one of her boards, and it says, "Thou shalt invest thy earnings in growth." And I think that that's something that a lot of entrepreneurs forget is we think about, okay, we're making $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 a month. Yes, cha-ching, I can start funding the lifestyle that I've always dreamt that this business would, but we forget where does that growth come from?
Exactly.
And is it
Right.
Is it momentary growth or is it self-sustaining growth? And how do we get it to the point where it's self-sustaining and then we can start to pull money out?
Exactly.
Right?
I mean, I would definitely, in hindsight, just add to that is probably work with a financial advisor. to help even just plan that part out, right? Because now that I'm no longer getting a steady income and I'm relying fully on my sales or my clients from our agency, it's just like, how do I manage my life? How do I keep my current lifestyle? Because I would like to keep it, right? If I'm making them, I would like to keep it. But how do I manage that, right?
Yeah.
And, I am of the mind now, if you are working a 9 to 5, I would not even touch the money. I would give it at least a year before even touching the money. I would just let the money accumulate, reinvest back into it, but just also accumulate a savings or a reserve from that as well. And so that's what I would do if I was working. Like if I didn't have a 9 to 5, I would definitely be a little bit more conservative on how much money I'm pulling from the company, because that also, if it was working while you were growing it, it can work more if you put more into it as well. Obviously things like the iOS change can, change things, but that is also one of the things you have to learn as an entrepreneur, to pivot as quickly as possible. And like my agency, Prototype Marketing, I actually was going to do more experiential marketing. And so I was going to leave, I left my 9 to 5 and I was like, oh, I'm going to do Brooklyn League and I'm going to do Prototype Marketing and experiential marketing. And I cannot do experiential marketing while in a pandemic, right?
Exactly.
And so I had to pivot. And so I pivoted and started working with e-commerce brands. And that actually helped that brand take off. So I think as an entrepreneur, you have to be able to be adaptable, as well as learning how to pivot. And even in times of where, oh my gosh, my all the clients and customers I was getting, all of that stopped. How can I get more? What else can I do back? Let's dip back into my target audience sheet and look at that and see what I can do.
So for those of our listeners and viewers who are thinking about becoming an entrepreneur, how do you know if you're that nimble before getting into it, before you taking that risk?
Yeah, I mean, I think it'll be much easier if you have a job already, for sure. I mean, because I think you can take those risks without having to worry about being a financial mishap on your end for your personal life, which is, again, another reason why I advocate for is having that. Or if you're not having a 9 to 5, if you're having something like another gig or something else that also brings in some type of income, because it allows you to take those risks to see if that's something that you can do, if you can be nimble or not. That I would also encourage people to find someone else who's in your field, who's doing that work, who probably started off the same way that you're kind of starting off, and get their insight, get their thoughts, and let them tell you about the pain points, so you can very much see like, ooh, I'm not built for this.
Yeah.
Like,
And it's okay if you're not, right? Not everybody must be an entrepreneur, right?
Yeah. I thought at one point, I had moved to New York. I had 2 internships, Island Def Jam Music Group, where I was working in college promotions, and also had a theater internship. And I was like, ooh, I want to be an actor. And I've done a couple of like shows. I did television. I did some other work. And I was like, I think I want to be an actor. And I got here and quickly realized I'm just not built for that. I didn't want to go through the starving artist phase. I was just like, so I was like, not for me. But I'm happy I at least tried and got to the point to realizing that. So yeah.
So let's dive into some of the challenges. What's your top warning for early stage entrepreneurs?
Top warning.
Watch out for pandemics. No,
Yes. I would say don't allow yourself to stay in to stick to one solution. And I want to explain that. For example, I was sticking to the solution of, oh, okay, ads were working until they were not working, right? So it's still being adaptable, it's still being able to pivot, but also having that foresight, think about it ahead. It's like, okay, in worst case scenario, like a contingency plan, or like an emergency contingency plan. In worst case scenario, if this dries up, what else can I do? How else can I bring customers or clients into my business? And so I would say be aware of that, not letting yourself just fall into something that it's going great. It's going, everything you thought it would be. What else? What are other avenues and ways and channels I can get people into my business?
Yeah. On a more optimistic note, how has being a gay man helped you become successful at entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I feel like within the community, and I can only really speak for where I live. I live in New York City, right? And we are here, and we are proud, and we're out. I think it's given me, as someone who's born and raised in the Deep South, a voice, and I think people read authentic and they get authentic and they get you're living your truth. And I think people want that and they see that and they embrace that. And so I feel like for me, it's helped me that way. Also, the community is very strong here. People love to support each other. And I definitely have a large group of friends who we all support each other in our businesses or in our endeavors. And also, I just think just overall, I think people just see me as someone who, I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm gay, or maybe it's from the South or not, but just personable. And but I just feel like most people, especially in New York City, just like, oh yeah, you're cool. Like it's not a problem. It's not a thing. So I don't know. I think it helped me out overall just by the community that I have here. And I don't know if it would be the same, to be completely honest, if I was in a place that did not necessarily have at least a robust community of people you can like lean on, because things are good, but sometimes things are not good, and you need to have your community you can kind of lean on, and also just completely be vulnerable with. And I feel like sometimes sharing that with my brothers and sisters within the community, we can kind of do that. I think that helps out.
So your story really says adaptability to me. I think that there's some aspects of comeback story here. There's some aspects of just facing challenges when they come up. Is this where you want to be? What's in the future for Fayon? Where is this the level of success that you want, or what's next?
Yeah. I feel like there's always what's next with me. There's always something else. There's always something like there. And so I have started a new venture. But what I've been really trying to do is kind of like, as I say, I start a new venture, I also want to be very thoughtful in the process. I am, being an entrepreneur back in that right now, I'm taking things slow with this kind of new business, just because I also dedicate a lot of my time to my job, and I actually love my job, and I love the work that I do there. And so it's like more so building community with this new business. I launched the travel business called Drifter, while working on scaling everything else. But I am now smart enough to know that I need a team of people. And so luckily I do have people who are working on Brooklyn League, as well as working with prototype marketing, which also frees up my time to do my 9 to 5, as well as think about other ventures or investments that I have. But I feel like I am very happy on where I am, but I feel like there's much more to come with my endeavors.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's always good to see you.
Thank you. Likewise.
Wow, there was so much great information in that interview, and I really loved Fayon's answer to the first question, where he shared those 3 important points. 1, know your audience. The more you know your audience, the better you can speak to them. 2, just launch. There's no perfect launch. Don't sacrifice the good for the great. You can always iterate. And then 3, it always costs way more than you expect it to cost.
It definitely does. Going back to that first point, I think it's really important for those of us as entrepreneurs to remember that idea of learning how to actually speak to your audience. For many of us as entrepreneurs, we want to try to speak to everyone because we think that that's our way to success, right? The more people we can talk to, the more likelihood we're going to have a successful business. But the problem with that, especially when it comes to our marketing, is that when we're trying to speak to everyone, we sometimes end up speaking to no one. So with targeted campaigns, we're actually able to speak to a small group of people who feel like they're being heard and will invest in our business, versus a large campaign that's speaking to everyone where no one feels heard and we don't make any money. So it actually can be a money saver to speak to a smaller community.
And a money maker.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us for another episode. Catch new episodes of Living Not So Fabulously every Wednesday at noon Eastern Time at yahoofinance.com, YouTube, and wherever you binge listen to your favorite podcasts.
And remember to subscribe where you can, and set those notifications. And until next time, stay fabulous.
This content was not intended to be financial advice and should not be used as a substitute for professional financial services.